Welcome to Lighting It Up with Jennifer Cox, and today we're going to be talking to Nathan Chung. Nathan works in cybersecurity and has done for a significant amount of years, and is also late diagnosed with ADHD. And I had a chance to talk to him about his experience, about all of those things and how they've impacted his life. And Nathan has been very vocal always for the rights of everyone from LGBTQIA+ to those who are neurodivergent, to people who are entering the cybersecurity community, and he is definitely a person to watch and learn from in the future. I guess where I'll start today, because Nathan, I've been following you for years and all the things that you say, and actually I think one of the most interesting things that I've followed you for that maybe you didn't realize, because it's not necessarily something that you do a lot of advocacy on, was your whole experience around employment in cybersecurity. And you were so open about it, and the challenges as a neurodivergent, and all of those bits. And I loved it. I loved following it. It taught me so much about the challenges because I tripped and fell into it. So it was different for me. So thank you for being so open about that whole experience. It's been useful for me and useful for me as a mentor as well with other people so that they can understand it. And I point them to you all the time.
Yep,
But
thanks.
I suppose when we get started, what I want to do first is for anyone who doesn't know you to understand a little bit about you and your background and how you got into the cybersecurity and what we should know about you. What are the important things we should know about you?
Sure, absolutely. So first, Jennifer, it's a pleasure to be on your show. So high level for me, I originally grew up in Hawaii, like the warm, sunny place in the Pacific where everyone loves to go for vacation and where it's always warm. So I grew up in there, and my very first job in the security field was working at Gymboree. They were one of the top kids retailers in the U.S. They used to be one of the best places to work in the U.S. once upon a time. So there, I was an analyst. I would focus on audit compliance and making sure we're compliant with those lovely PCI DSS audit controls. Hard job for the first time, but being in a non-technical role, it helped me transition to cybersecurity a lot easier. Because for many of us, like getting cybersecurity for the first time, I was not, and still am not a hacker, not a traditional role, but audit compliance is a very reasonable, I would think, role to dive into the first time. I'm very open that I have autism, ADHD, and CPTSD, and I'm late diagnosed. I'm not one of those lucky kids who get diagnosed at an early age. I'm very, very late diagnosed.
And speaking of late diagnosis, actually, I too, I'm 45 now. I was diagnosed at 43, and you were one of the very kind people that I reached out to about getting an assessment, and we're super supportive about that experience. Do you think that there's enough out there for people now with regards to seeking diagnosis, both men and women? Do you think it's changed enough now?
That's a loaded question. High level, the bar has not moved much. I think the things have improved. Like before, people thought, oh, we can't talk about autism because it's this spiritually evil thing. Like you hear that from people at church, or some people think it's vaccines or it's caused by women doing something wrong. All these negative things. But nowadays, the science side has gotten better sometimes. But sadly, and I'm happy you brought this up because sadly, like as we both know, like in the cybersecurity field, similarly in the neurodiversity field, it is very, very much male dominant. So like, can you imagine a man and a woman go to a doctor to get a diagnosis for, like, say, autism? The doctor would tell the man, yeah, you clearly have autism, no problem, all good. Same thing with a woman, but he tells her, wait, you cannot possibly have autism or ADHD. You're a woman, or if you get rid of both genders, you have someone from LGBTQIA who's like trans. Same thing. The doctor would tell them, no, since you're not a man, you cannot possibly have autism or ADHD. It's sad and heartbreaking hearing the stories from women or those who are trans who hear that from doctors even to this day. You would think the medical profession would have advanced, but no, this is still happening today where women and those who are not males are still being told, no, we cannot diagnose you, we cannot help you, you cannot have these conditions.
And why do you think that it's still that way?
that's another question. I think high level, it's it's a stereotypes where women are, they're just seen differently from men because a lot of medical research again focus on the men. So as a result, women suffer because consider that 15% of the global population is estimated to be neurodivergent. Around 50% of the workforce, tech workforce globally is estimated to be neurodivergent, but yet women make up only 30% of the workforce, and then even then, only 1% of women are estimated to have diagnosed with autism. That's a very horrible number. Think about it, just 1%. And inversely, boys/men are 2 to 3 times more likely to get a diagnosis. Needless to say, that is messed up
It is,
and
isn't it?
wrong.
And I know I've heard like one of the reasons given for women, and it's definitely one I could relate to, is that we learn how to mask
Yep,
earlier.
asking
And I
is
know
huge.
I remember a specific situation, and I've said it to my parents who think it's fascinating because they don't remember the situation. I remember being about 4 and being at what was called an ideal homes exhibition. So you went in and you looked at everything from baths to tiles to kitchens, whichever, that people just like to fantasize about what their homes were going to be like. And when if you brought your kids to it, generally they would have somebody that would give away balloons. And I was one of 4 at that time, one of 6 later, but there was 4 of us all kind of within 4 years of each other. And I was the only one that they could convince to go and ask for the balloons for everybody else. So I went, I asked for the balloons, I brought them back, and I remember my mother saying to me, "Oh, you're so good to do that. It's great to have somebody who'll talk." And I remember, I actually actively remember from that point making it my business to be more chatty with people, whether I was comfortable at doing it or not, because it was a good thing to do. And my parents liked me more because of it. And only when I looked back, when I had my diagnosis and I looked back and I was like, looking at my school reports, it's obvious, and looking at things through my history, it's obvious to other people. But where did I first was I first able to nail it down to? And that's one of the earliest kind of situations for me. And then masking began from there. And undoing that as an adult with an adult diagnosis, for me anyway, there's a lot of it's like an identity crisis that you go through because, like, hang on, who was I before I started doing all this masking? Or even, I have different peers of friends and people that I work with, and if I put them all in the same room together, I'm not actually sure how I'm supposed to behave because
Yeah.
I do differently with all of them. And realizing that and the energy and such that it takes, it does make sense that that would be something that one of the reasons, but I don't buy it other than all of the issues we already know with regards women's health and ability to be heard being really at the core of it, I guess, in there. So for
Yep.
you, with your career in cybersecurity, do you think, and I know it's hard to um, conceive of it completely, if you're neurodivergent, you're neurodivergent. You can't go, let me be not neurodivergent for a moment. But do you think that it's played a significant role for you with regards to your career in cyber?
I think high level, I would say yes, because as science, there's been many stereotypes about neurodiversity that people like me are very much drawn to STEM field, and I agree with that. And growing up, I really enjoyed computers, like building my own computer and video game, all the nerdy stuff. At the same time, that it opens the door to potential stereotype where yes, we are good at tech and cybersecurity, but it is not the only path. There are multiple paths. Like for example, I know about people who love art or photography or other stuff. So it's not a one size fits all. And going back to what we were mentioning earlier, I think diagnosis is also hard because even for myself as an adult at my age, it was hard to find anyone who could do an autism diagnosis. Back in the day, I was in California, and I would be told over and over, sorry, these conditions only affect children. So the majority of the practitioners out there only can diagnose children, and they're telling me, sorry, no, no. it wasn't until I moved to Colorado that I was able to finally get an adult diagnosis for autism ADHD into moving to get that done.
That's crazy. I hadn't even thought about that because here in Ireland we've got two different paths. So you can go down the psychologist route and get an assessment, but it's not worth the paper it's written on. It doesn't matter how great the psychologist is, but if you want to seek any kind of if you want to go down the route of medication, you can't do it. You have to then go to a psychiatrist and get an assessment. And of course, all those things are super expensive now, and some health insurance covers it and some don't. But with the kid side of things, you can get a kid's pediatrician. I'm trying to think what a kid's doctor is called because that's not even a thing in Ireland. There's a doctor. That's it. But I know pediatrician is a thing in the States very specifically. But we have one in Ireland that's a
Wow.
pediatrician that is also qualified to give the ADHD diagnosis that my boys have gone to. There are other ways of getting it for your kids, of course, through the public system, but I know I applied through the public system in Ireland and I waited 3 years and I didn't even get any confirmation that I was on a list. I got nothing back from them at
Oh,
all. So I
sorry
ended
to
up
hear.
going, it is, yeah, I know. Now, thankfully, at the time, I think I was somewhat ignorant and didn't really appreciate how much of the challenges that I had were tied up in it. But when I got to a point, you add menopause to that, and then it's just like, we'll flip that switch and we'll make it 100 times worse. Then it had to be done. I had to do something about it. And the relief then, finding out what it was and figuring out how to manage it, was a complete game changer for me.
Absolutely, same for me too. And something else came to mind. I think the other issue that causes a lot of people to not get a diagnosis that a lot of people don't talk about is the stereotype that these conditions only affect white people. So if you're not white, so for example, if you're black or like for me, Asian, you can't have these conditions. It's not applicable to you. A lot of people throughout the neurodiversity community globally, for some reason, they shy away from talking about that. But the cultural aspect, the family, even nation of origin, where you are living in the world, it significantly impacts whether or not you can get help and support.
Oh my God, you know what? I hadn't even thought about that. Here's me making assumptions about a level playing field once you get in front of a psychiatrist. Because I think I would automatically assume if it's that hard to get in front of them, therefore it must be a level playing field when you get there. And it seems so obvious now that you've said it. I'm like, why didn't I think that? Of course, there are other hurdles. There's bound to be additional hurdles if you've got anything remotely different to the textbook, white guy approach to things. Even like you say, culturally, I have a friend who is diagnosed and he is South African, and he's like, I want to know for me, but the culture here is not going to buy it. I'm just lazy as far as they're concerned, but he wanted to know for himself, and it was important to him. And that's just like say culturally, I couldn't even begin to imagine in cultures in some of the Asian cultures as well how that would be received. And do you think I'm going to use the word? I love to see people's reaction to it. Like, how do you feel about people using the word superpower when they talk about neurodivergent?
That's also very controversial in the risk committee. I think myself and others, we don't care for it because, yes, having these conditions and being neurodivergent, having being different, it means we're different. And that by default, by society, means lesser than something is messed up with us. But that's wrong. So it's kind of arguing some people today, well, it means we have superpowers, which is also, in my view, wrong. And that's many in the community also share that because it's like a misconception. It's like putting this in a different column and acting as if we're special or extraordinary, but no, it doesn't mean that at all. It just means we're different. And at the end of the day, if you think about it, there is no such thing as normal. Every single person on this planet is different. We just got to accept you're different. I'm different. We just got to accept differences. And real quick, back to the topic you were mentioning before. If you or your guests want to or your audience want to find out more about how autism and these conditions are seen throughout the world, one show I recommend is called "The Reason I Jump." It's based on a book from a young boy in Japan, the Netflix has a show where they translated that book into a show where they show you how all these conditions are seen throughout the world, even like far places like the Caribbean and whatnot. That's very different. It's like, in fact, it's quite terrifying in some places of the world.
I'm going to get that today because I do love a good book. So you can see me twitch there. I was immediately going to start writing it down when I realized that we're recording. I don't need to write this down.
Yeah. But yeah, the book itself is more focused on experiences of a young Japanese boy, but the show that's based on that is the one where they look at it throughout the world. I think that was very educational because the other one of the biggest factors where not can get help is also the cultural piece. Like for me as an Asian, there is an invisible wall that says we do not talk about this. We never talk about it, and we are condemned if we ever try to get help because it makes the family look bad, it makes the parents look bad, and we essentially betray all of our ancestors that came before us. That blocks many Asians and people from other cultures from getting any help or diagnosis.
Yeah.
People don't talk about it too much for some reason. I don't understand, but like for me, that was a huge wall I had to break through, and it holds back a lot of people.
It's a tough place to be in because you're up against the cultural norm and upsetting family members versus doing something for somebody who now feels like you did. That's the way I always look at it. If there's anybody out there that feels as absolutely frustrated and helpless as I did, why should they continue to feel like that? But I'm not going up against the same cultural difficulties when it comes to that. That said, now my parents were like, they were of the same kind of, that's just laziness opinion until it was me. They actually, when my sibling got diagnosed, because he was quiet and he used to be happily enough just doing his own thing. But because I was more outgoing, when my diagnosis came in after his, about 3 years after his, they changed their opinion on it, that it must be a real thing then, because she works a lot and she works hard and she's doing all right. And I'm even within my own family seeing the difference of opinion. And I made it my business to school them real hard from his diagnosis to mine, because I understood it at that point, not necessarily them. But I couldn't imagine, like, they would have forgiven me either way. They'd have moved on and we'd have all moved on. It wouldn't have really mattered. But yeah, when it's a big cultural thing, I couldn't imagine I haven't had to go up against something like that big time here, not in Ireland. We've gotten pretty diverse in the last decade. Like we've a long way to go, don't get me wrong, but we're getting there. We're getting there. So do you think then, when you're working obviously in this fast-paced environment, everyone always calls cybersecurity a fast-paced environment. I don't yet know it to be quiet in any part of it, but and there's a lot of detail that's needed in it. And then, of course, being neurodivergent brings with it its own challenges, whether it's around concentration or sensory or environment. How do you manage the two of those things as a neurodivergent individual?
That's a good question. It wasn't easy at first because for most of my life, I didn't even know I had these conditions. So it was like learning how to drive a car again, so to speak. So for example, once I understood and I got my diagnosis, and I understood I had these conditions, the books and materials that are out there, it helps a lot. For example, what helps me a lot is to understand like spoon theory. Just think of it kind of like a battery. You get. I had to relearn like how that works. Like every day we have a battery of this is the amount of energy we have throughout the day. Use it well. So you gotta simply manage it better. For example, you need to do something like go shopping or in the cybersecurity context, like you have of course meetings and you have your actual work. You gotta just balance that out throughout the day so that you don't get exhausted, you don't get burned out. Just for myself and like for others, like communicating with other people in a meeting is very draining. So it's always good to set aside some time to recover from the meeting after the meeting.
It's so true, and it's such a simple thing, really, but it's massive. I know what I found was being vocal about it. So before a diagnosis, I didn't feel like I could ask for that space because I wasn't validated yet. But even at home, like my husband recognizes it now. I tend to retreat to a specific chair in the house with my phone, and I'll play like matching games on my phone, and I'll zone out from everybody. And it could be for 10 minutes, it could be the entire day, depending on how overdone I am. But he recognizes it now, whereas before I used to be so anxious about, God, I need to be doing laundry or I should be up doing something else, but I hadn't the energy to do it. And now, I'll even approach him or the kids. Most of my kids are adults and they get it now. Or even people that I work with and say, I'm all people out. I need some like time by myself, however long, and come back. And I feel comfortable saying that, but it took me a long time to identify that that was what I needed, you know?
Yep.
And do you find like the first thing my boss asked me when I told him I got a diagnosis, and he was super supportive beforehand, the first thing he asked me is, well, what can I do to help you? And I went, oh, I don't know. What do I need? Like, I had no idea. And I had no idea that that question was going to be so difficult to answer. How do you manage that when it comes to asking for things? Like, do you know what you need or does it change?
That's a great question. But first, let's go back to what you were talking about earlier. I think I very much appreciate what you were saying just now about the conversation with your boss. Because the working situation for many individuals, such as myself, it is with COVID-19, many of us work from home, and working from home has been tremendously beneficial for the neurodivergent community globally. But now, what do we see now? All that's going away. People are saying, back to the office, and community's hurting. And for the managers, I would say it is very much dependent on the organization, because some are very much open and they want to help you, whereas I've worked at some other places where they are very much they see it kind of like a factory. Either you can do the work and we like you, or you can't do the work and we need to get rid of you. It's
Yeah.
it's a sad reality. That's ableism. That's pretty
Yeah.
much ableism.
True. And the funny thing is, I've always found that when encouraged, I can do 10 times the work. If you just give me that little bit of breathing room, and it's not that I should do 10 times the work, but when I'm supported and relaxed and allowed to do it with that little bit of a difference, whether it is that I'm at home or whether it's that I listen to music while I do it or whatever it is that I need, I tend to perform so much better and beyond what's necessarily needed with just that little tiny little. And it makes no difference to my boss whether I'm listening to music or whether I'm working from home. We were never even in the same country, but yeah, the tiniest adjustment can make such a massive difference, at which point then I can tap into the things I know I can do really, really well because I'm comfortable tapping into them, if that makes sense. So if people are going to use the term of superpower, I can't tap into that stuff if you're not going to let me feel comfortable enough to be able to do it. And that's exactly how I feel about it. I simply can't. I can't turn it on or turn it off. You need to give me enough room to feel comfortable being myself, and then I'm able to lean into it is probably the best I can say. Some days where that just ain't happening at all. But when it works, when I'm, hyper focused, I guess, on something, like I'll starve the whole day, but I will get a record amount of things done. It'll be the best work I've ever done, but I can never do that in an environment where I don't feel like I'm able to do the things that I need to do to be able to work, whether it's take time out or listen to music or, sit at a desk that's not at the someone walking behind me. I hate that. We all have these different things. And I want to be able to tap
Absolutely.
into it as much as they want me to be able to tap into it, but it doesn't work that way.
Yep,
We
absolutely. And I'm happy you said that. It's just like, in many ways, it's just like when you get a new car. You want to make sure everything, the temperature is just right, the seat is just right. You, it's important to feel comfortable.
Yeah.
And as for managers, I also tell managers that, like, I understand their job is hard managing people, and there's all these various demographic, LGBTQIA, color, race, age, all these various things. I break it down very easy for them. Just ask your coworker, your work, the people you work with, what do you need? What can I do to support you? Just ask that, and just give
Yeah.
them what they need, and boom, watch them go.
Yeah, it's that simple. And I've done it. I've been a people manager. I wanted to be one for years, and I have been one now for 3 years. And I've had people that are neurodivergent. I've had people that are divorced and separated. I've had parents. I've had people who can't be parents. I've had all the different kinds in, and I've had LGBTQ. But I've had probably not everything, I'm sure, but I've had lots of different kinds of people and lots of different cultures as well, and cultures who don't even agree with each other as well in the same team. And I think it's been one of the most rewarding experiences learning the differences. So it's not even learning what the good things are about everybody. It's learning the differences so that I'm never going to get it all. I'm never always going to get it right, but I'm going to be comfortable and make them comfortable enough that I can go, do you know what? So you're celebrating this holiday. How does that work? And what does that mean in your culture? And, what's involved in celebrating it? If I was in your house and saw it, I'm curious to know what it's all about and why and who would be there. And if they're open to answering all the questions, I'll generally remember it. And, I've learned a lot about that holiday or that culture. And then, I learn more about them as an individual. And if it's to do with adjustments that they need or they want to, things like, I had an employee on my team who, when they get overwhelmed, they send me a message and say, I just need a timeout. I'm like, Grant, crack on. Just give me a shout when you're back and we'll make sure that you're good to go. Or do you need to take any more time? And I never asked questions about how long they needed, what had happened, because when somebody, what I learned anyway, is when that individual was at that stage that they needed to ask for a timeout, they absolutely definitely were not at a stage where they wanted to invest more emotional energy in talking about it. They just needed to take the time out for now. And I learned that, I learned that people learn in different ways, progress in different ways. And it was fascinating. And by far one of the most rewarding things of being a leader. So to me, it just seems like a really easy thing to do. And I think that any leader I've come across who struggles with it, I think, is afraid of getting it wrong.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think if you can create an environment where you open up and say, I'm afraid of getting this really wrong. Can I ask questions or are you comfortable talking about it? That's what I ended up doing because I had no clue in the beginning. So creating that safe space. Have you ever taught your managers in that way? That's how I felt sometimes. I've had to teach them what I need or what to do or how to handle situations.
Absolutely. And I think you brought that up because I think 2 jobs ago I had the very supportive managers who's very straight with me that they understand neurodiversity. They are probably have like ADHD themselves. And one of the biggest reasons that leads to that is when they have kids who have like autism, ADHD, they understand seeing their kids. So that makes them more empathetic. I think that manager from 2 jobs ago, that was one of the better managers because they understood these conditions. When versely, even what a lot of people don't talk about, even at those companies which you see they're all over the news that they're famous for having their neurodiversity hiring programs, I have heard horror stories like where, example, an individual had an autistic meltdown and the boss would just mock them and laugh at them, and everyone throughout the entire team laughs at them, and of course that person quits. And that's at one of those companies. Like when you hear stories like that, it's heartbreaking. Like
Yeah.
when a company does not support people like us, it's very sad.
Yeah. And it's completely unnecessary. Like I love listening to the posts from, I'm trying to remember his first name now. I think is Adam. He does ADHD Chatter, I think, and he was the founder of Lad Bible. But he talks about how he attacked his career and was really successful at things he did, but he hated the way that he had to work in some of those environments. And when he got out, I was one he was talking about where he had to increase their following basically, and he got in, he did it, but he only worked for him for a couple of months because he had to do it in a strict, specific way that they wanted him to do it with regards to his working environment and such. And then when he stopped doing that, he realized that he blossomed. He's a late diagnosis as well, but that he blossomed and he now knows what works from what doesn't. And actually, I think he puts up a post pretty regularly for late diagnosis adults of ADHD, and he's like, "You were always good enough." And every time I see it, it's like, oh, that's hard because I
Yes.
didn't know that was a way I felt about it until somebody first said it. Like when I had my diagnosis, my
Yes.
psychiatrist said to me, he said, you're above average intelligence. I was like, but he said, you're not stupid. Did you know you're not stupid? And I, of course, burst into tears. And to anyone who might know me, might go, "Did you think you were? There's no way you thought you were stupid." It's like, you're not in my head. Of course I did, because everything was so much harder. Everyone else seemed to be able to do things, and they were just doing them. And I was like, why do I have to work so much harder to do what they're doing all the time?
I know that's true. I know I was very similar, very similar, and I think it hits on the most one of the most important things of all. I often say it in my talks, where in a world which is very ableist but it's very discriminatory, what a lot of people don't realize is ourselves. Because like growing up, I thought I was neurotypical. I wanted to be just like normal. I and then when I found out I was autistic, I think it was hard for me, and for a lot of other people in our community, that is hardest of all. Accepting yourself that you are good enough, you that you have these conditions, and there's nothing wrong with that. A lot of people have a hard time getting over that one hump, and sadly, as a result, the rate of suicide and mental health challenges, it's there. And we add in there the other challenges, like example, if you IA plus, or if you're not a man, the challenges keep piling on.
And then even undiagnosed, like they haven't even
Diagnosed, yes.
the statistics for suicide for anyone who's undiagnosed, because they were in fact undiagnosed. I wish we could figure that one out and see, because I'd say we'd be taken aback by the percentage of those who are undiagnosed if we were able to find that out after the fact, but we won't. Do you use anything, any tools, any programs, any, like, I realize I've been fidgeting with this, which is not a fidget toy. I own fidget toys, and I never have them. This is a little case with dried flowers in it.
Oh, lovely. I got this. I got rollers. These are very well.
Things like that. Is there other things that you use, or even programs? Like some people I know use the talk to text, or the other way around, as such, to read what's on the page. Is there anything that you use that you find useful?
Still a lot of tools out there. For me personally, what I learned is just having a kind of like a Trello, a Kanban board. It's part of the agile project management methodology, where you keep track of like what's on your plate, what's on your backlog, what you got to do today, and what can wait. Just having that kind of board helps a lot. In fact, I would even argue that the project management methodology is a very powerful tool for those who have executive functioning challenges. In fact, I wrote about this in one of my newsletters, where, like, imagine Star Trek, where you see the big bad enemy Borg cube ship. First reaction is to shut down, because you're shocked, you don't know what to do. But if you use like project management principle, you break down the task into manageable small chunks, then distribute that based on your time, who's going to do it, and then guess what? Your day goes by faster because it's more manageable.
I like that. I've never heard it put down, and I used to watch Star Trek as well.
Yeah, me too. I'm a huge nerd.
Yeah.
But yeah, essentially, instead of being overwhelmed, because for me, the first time something new or there's a change, I get overwhelmed. I often shut down. But I learned, like, after you recover from that, if you just chop it up to small bite-sized chunks, like, instead of eating that huge steak, just chop it up and just eat a little bit at a time, or the vegetables. That, and also the use various tools, because high level people just assume we're all autistic, we're all neurodivergent, we're all the same. That's wrong. We're all different. We all have different needs. So like, what works for me may not work for you. It takes time to understand. First, you gotta understand what your needs are. Number two, understanding how you work, which to me, I'm still working product. And number three is just going out there and understanding what tools can help you to do X better. That's still a journey for me sometimes.
And there's so many like tools cropping up too. There's a lot of my notes are cropping up saying that they're like the new tool to fix your ADHD or help you fix your ADHD. I'm like, and I know plenty of people like things like checklists. I hate a checklist, because all I see, even if I've done 90 things on the checklist, I'll still see the ones I haven't done, and all I'll see is the failure.
Yes.
But I do like, if I have to do something that equates to a checklist, a list of things to do, I like something that I can kind of rip off and throw away. So I'm not only looking at what's left as a new list of things to start, as opposed to alongside of things. And it's such a simple thing, but it makes a difference to me when I look at how I feel about the work that I've done today. You know, I was given out last week. I think I even gave out on my LinkedIn post because I was having a super productive day. I was like having conversations and I was preparing for things and presentations and got loads of stuff done. And then at the very end of the day, I went to print out what I had been preparing for the presentation, and the damn printer won't work. I'm looking at it like evil little thing it is in the corner. It'll print if I scan something on it. It'll print that, so I know the printer works. I just don't know why it's not like in my computer. But it just would not work. Nothing. I
Yeah.
was at it for like 2 hours trying to get it work. And then I decided that my whole day had been ruined and I had achieved nothing because I couldn't get the printer to work.
Yeah.
Never mind these things that was about a week's worth of work that I managed to get done in the day before, or beforehand. Nope, that didn't matter anymore. Couldn't get the damn printer to work. I'm so cross, and I just abandoned the computer. But I find it way too easy to be that kind of self-destructive, I think, with
Yep.
with
I've gone through
achievement.
that.
Yeah. And
Just,
how do you manage that on your side?
I think it's hard to be honest. There are days where I still struggle. Like, number one, I either have a meltdown or I get angry. But I think what I learned the hard way is sometimes it's good to just take a step back, just go out for a walk or play a game or watch something. Just get out of the current mode you're in. Because think of it in a software world, we call it kind of like a software loop. You're just going round and round and round circles. So instead of that, just break, stop the loop, stop the constant problem, and just take a step back and think of something else. Sometimes in my experience, it pretty much gets the brain to reset, and then you can attack the problem more efficiently later.
I like that. I like that. I'm reading a book at the minute called The Chimp Paradox, which I was introduced to by a sales team as a sales tool because of the chimp response. But the more I listen to it, the more I'm like, yes, of course it's useful from the sales side of things. And I bought it when I was still doing sales, but I finally got around to reading it now. But understanding the importance of doing that stop for a minute and think about, is my response the one I want to be having, or is it just an instinctive response to something? And if I can take a minute and assess which one it is, and then kind of recalibrate and come at it with the human response, as they call it, the way I want to be responding to it, then I can like reset my behavior. And I'm very much bearing in mind that the book isn't targeted at neurodivergent. But for me, I find, given what I've always found, is if I can deconstruct something and make sense of it in my mind in almost a mechanical way, then I had heart surgery 18 years ago. Right, it was in a keyhole, nothing massive, but I was really, really terrified of it, as people would be. So I sat down with the doctor for way too long so that she would explain to me exactly what was going to happen, exactly what the problem was, give me all the terms that I could Google and read up on. And I want all the information, all the facts, all the stuff, so that I feel like there's nothing that's going to come at me that I won't have anticipated, including the possibility of dying. I have to go through everything there. And then I was like, I'm okay now. I understand it. And for anyone else that has questions, I could probably answer those ones too. But I find that with things like that, that's the way I like to do it. And it helps. I mean, I know it can take a lot of energy to do that, but for me, it helps to kind of demystify things then from there. So how long have you been working in cybersecurity, Nathan?
So I've been in tech in general for like 26 years now. Cybersecurity specific, I'd say 11 years.
Really?
It's a long time.
Wow.
And tech has changed a lot since then. And the other piece with it, real quick, is I'm sure you're aware of the Women in Security Awards in Australia. I think it's going to be around this month or next. They are
Yeah.
going to have a neurodiversity champion category. I think it's the first and only Women in Cyber Awards event in the world I'm aware of that has a neurodiversity category. So that's exciting.
Good. About time. I've seen a few of them crop up in the generic kind of cybersecurity
Yes.
awards type things, but not specific in the women, which is great to see the correlation of the two finally being put together. Because I know since I started talking about mine, the amount of people similar to what you're saying, the amount of people that have reached out, because I know I reached out to you, and yet when people reached out to me, I was like, why are people reaching out to me? Even though I did the same thing. You popped up, I remember, on the particular day that I was kind of trying to figure out what was what. And I was like, I'm going to chance my arm and reach out to him. He seems to know stuff. And you were very, very kind in your response. but the amount of women that have reached out of all ages. And what I've learned as well is that a lot of the women reach out and either look for a diagnosis or ask questions about it because they're mothers as well. That they do it because they're seeing some signs and symptoms in their own children, or they've sought diagnosis in their own children and got it. And then they're starting to go, hang on there now. I see a lot of similarities on my side, and they've come second place in those instances, which has been really, really interesting. Do you think that for women in cybersecurity, neurodiversity is impacting them differently?
Absolutely. Here's something to think about. I even did a poll to ask if if you have a disability and when you go to the conference, I asked, do you feel that your needs are met? What's shocking about that, what a lot of people will probably find shocking, is the answer, of course, went down gender lines. The majority of the men, of course, said, yeah, no problem. Their needs are pretty much met. But women and non-women, they're the majority of the no's. So think about that. And that's, even though the percentage of women is in the tech and cyber field is roughly 25-30%, majority of them are shut out of the conferences, even more so if they are having a disability. It's
Wow.
sad. Because I strongly feel that if, in order to get more women and non-women into the cybersecurity field, they need to address neurodiversity and disability needs, to help that make it more accessible and just make the environment much more comfortable to work in. They do that, more women will join the field.
Absolutely. And again, that's not really difficult to do. That's
Correct.
the bit
It's not.
difficult is like it's not difficult to do. It's a little even in when I was working in Tenable, we had brought into our offices breastfeeding rooms. Now they weren't additional rooms. There were rooms that were smaller meeting rooms that now had a little slider on it that said if it was vacant or occupied, and frosted glass on the windows up to kind of head height. Other than that, it was exactly the same office as before. Well, inside it also had one comfortable chair, and it had like a little fridge if you needed to, if there were snacks and stuff there, but also if you needed to store anything. And that wasn't a massive financial investment,
Correct.
but it was a huge show of support for any women who are planning on having children, have children, or feeding or expressing whatever it is that they need to do. Just even knowing that it was there. And there was a lock then obviously inside the door if you were inside, because you and I both know that even if you say the room is occupied, somebody's gonna walk in on it.
Yes.
It's just the lock. But when it's not being used for that, then it can be used as a meeting room. But the priority was always given to, if a woman wanted to use it first, the meeting had to be moved somewhere else as such. Now you don't book it for your feeding as such. And that was like I say, it wasn't a big financial investment. It wasn't a huge disturbance for everybody else in the office, but it was massive for all of the women or anyone that might, be pregnant or give birth in the office then. Well, they wouldn't do it in the office, but that is in the office then from there. So it always baffles me how these things are so easy to do, and yet so many places don't do them. And I don't buy the argument from people that, well, if we do it for you, we're going to have to make changes and give things to everybody else.
Yep.
I'm like,
It's a common argument, very common. But yeah, I think the thing you brought up is we just talked about now is very interesting, because conferences, is very inaccessible. So me and a friend named Kat Cantillo, we were part of the WESIS Neurodiversity affiliate. What we did, we collaborated and we created a neuro inclusion check. Think of it as a checklist to make conferences more accessible. It's basic things. Like, it was created based on a lot of community feedback and a lot of basic things, like things like have captions in all your videos, have handouts, just have printed handouts so people who can't see the tiny little words on the screen can see it on the paper. Have maps so like when you go to conferences you don't get lost. Or even that's one of the biggest ones I got from the community is things like having gender neutral bathrooms. So if you're LGBTQIA+, you have a place to go. Or even addressing your sensory need, like like when you go have a like supper, like you have all the clanging metal utensils. That's very sensory overwhelming for some people. Or even having, the biggest thing of all is having a sensory quiet room. So if you're having a meltdown, go there to decompress. A lot of conferences, to my knowledge, do not have that. They all say something like, kind of like we described, like go to this room where your people are breastfeeding, or RSA got trouble because their room was the same as the prayer room. They got in trouble for that.
Yeah, I mean, like you say, the quiet space is something like everywhere that you're going to have a conference is going to have space to have a quiet space, and it doesn't typically have to be used huge because you're not shoving 500 people into a quiet space. It's not a quiet space then typically. It just needs to be, and it doesn't have to be in fancy pants decor. Literally is somewhere people want to go where they can just get out of all of the noise. And I know I've been to conferences here and I've been to conferences in the States. And one thing I found about the States is, as you would imagine, it's bigger. So the conference spaces are bigger, and therefore noisier, and they've got more going on in the environment. And they even, like one of the ones I was at more recently, even had like a mall type place in the middle of the conference space, which was completely new to me because conference spaces in Ireland, there's not many hotels where you'd get a room that would seat more than maybe 400 people. Never mind have thousands of them at a conference. And now we would have our own problems as well with those spaces. But it's just, yeah, it was a very different environment to be in, and one I guess I wasn't as well prepared for as I thought, and found then by the end of the day I was well and truly too tired for any socializing or anything like that because of so much noise and interaction then throughout the day. Do you think I know you talked about being involved in the WESIS, the Neurodivergent affiliate. Is there other projects that you've been involved in that you take advantage of being neurodivergent, or that you found that it is an advantage for you to be a part of?
Let's see, high level. It's just now that I understand. Now that I know I'm neurodivergent and have diagnosis, I've been doing what I can to help the community, help people to, like, when people ask me and send me a direct message to ask for help, I help them out. Most recently, in about a week, I signed up for a policy maker class, so I'm gonna learn about how to do disability advocacy through public policy. So I think that's gonna be huge. But on top of that, I just try to support people and try to raise awareness where I can.
And you have done so much, and I don't know whether I know I mentioned it 2 or 3 times already since we started. I don't know whether you appreciate the difference that you've been making as one person. Because for me, I've always thought, well, if one individual walks away having learned something or feeling better about themselves or seeking something that they now know how to get that they didn't know how to get before, then I've done well. But I mean, the amount of interactions that you've had, not just with individuals on the likes of LinkedIn. LinkedIn's where I see you. I don't even know if you're on other platforms. That's where I see it. But you're so outspoken, which used to be a dirty word here in Ireland. If anyone ever said you were outspoken, it meant you were trouble. But not at all in your case. Outspoken in all of the best ways, not afraid to call out something that needs to be called out and stand up for someone who needs it. And that, even just watching those activities happen is in itself inspirational. It makes me feel a little bit braver about doing the same thing here. And I think one thing I've learned from the likes of LinkedIn or just even from social media is that if one person has contacted you and said, you've made a difference, or you've helped me with this, or I've understood that, there's dozens and dozens more that haven't contacted you to say it. So, I mean, it goes without doubt that there's hundreds and hundreds, if not more, out there that have been influenced by that. And
absolutely,
you can see
and
your
I'm happy you said that, because to give you an example, about two years ago, I've had an annual event where I would have guests. I would arrange an event where I would have guests on who are guest speakers who are both neurodivergent and LGBTQIA plus, because I knew that's an important demographic which doesn't get enough spotlight or attention. I was very much I can be very emotional hearing some of the responses from people in the audience, because for many of them it was the very, very first time in their lives seeing people who were both. Because they've seen either or, but have to see people who are both. Some in the audience they told me later on they were literally crying hearing the story, because they think they live their lives alone, thinking that their life is not going to go anywhere. And when they see people who are not only open about being bold, but who are thriving and having successful careers, it gives them hope. And I think hope is a very powerful message to give to people.
Absolutely. I think once you've got that, you can really overcome just about anything. And like you say, the visibility, like we talk about that a lot, of course, as women in cybersecurity, visibility is key. And I've become obsessed now. Anytime I'm in a room at a conference, how many of the speakers, like what's the ratio of men to women as speakers? If I'm, looking at a company or even within companies I've worked in, how many women are on the board? How many women are decision makers? How many women leaders they have? I want to know, like, am I wasting my time trying to go further in my career with this company? Am I wasting my time trying to go further in my career anyway? Because if these people don't exist, then do I have to be the first one? No, I'm not going to do it. Do I have to be the first one? Or, it must be hard to do if they're not there. So that visibility, like you're saying in that case, suddenly it's like it adds a whole other part to the brain where you go, oh, now I'm going to do all this stuff as well that just wasn't even triggered beforehand because it was just not even deemed an impossibility. I think when you've got a lack of visibility, it's just not even conceived of. Never mind thought of as being impossible. It's just that's just how it is. We just don't do those things. So to see it is massive. Like it's so massive. And that's wonderful to hear that more the merrier.
And I'm happy you brought that up because I think we, especially in the tech and cybersecurity industry, we are essentially slaves to the system. We were told, you start to work at the entry level, they become the middle, they should become managers, then the executive suite. But for many people, like this is myself, I don't have any aspiration. I don't want to be sitting in meetings. So I think people they just need to deprogram that, just get that bad code out of their system to understand, and just focus on yourself. Just think what will make you happy. Like for me, I'm not in a manager or executive role, and I'm relatively happy in my current role. I'm happier than when I was a manager. So just gotta find your happiness and just hold on to it.
Absolutely. It takes, I think when you go into management, it takes its toll in both good and bad ways. I mean, there's always going to be difficult things to deal with. And when you're dealing with so many different personalities and so many different needs and such too, it takes an emotional toll. If you're doing it right, it takes an emotional toll as well. And I think that has to be, I think people need to talk about that more. Not going to lie, on the management side, people, it's not just a title and it's not just bigger money or more responsibility. That it's damn hard if you want to do a good job of it. It's damn hard. Anyone can go in and be a babysitter or play chess and just move things around. But if you're going to be a really good manager and you're going to actually lead people, I think people need to be way more transparent about what's actually involved in the job, so people can go into it informed. I feel like I was pretty well informed when I went into it, and still there was a lot of things that caught me by surprise, and I just wasn't ready for. Actually, just for the record, completely unrelated. When I went into being a manager first, one thing I definitely wasn't prepared for was the lack of information on how to be a manager when you're a manager. I'd studied the courses on management and worked alongside other people who'd gone into management, but it was just kind of you're put there and they're like, off you go then, manage stuff. Like, what exactly do you need me to hand over and do? Where's the list of things that I'm definitely responsible for?
I know that feeling. I'm praised you for that because I'm sure you're aware there is a stereotype in the tech and cyber world where if you have autism, you cannot be a manager because you don't have the mental capacity to do it. And that's, I really need to swear, but I shouldn't. I mean, met people in positions of power who feel that if they see a person with autism, they would never, ever want that person in a management role ever. It's like people like that. It's they hold people like us back, but at the same time, what I tell people is don't be afraid to confront and say, yes, I have autism. I've been a manager, so
yeah, true, and everyone survived.
Yep.
I think again, it's that fear, isn't it? That I think I genuinely used to think that a lot of people were stopping people that were different from progressing in their careers because they were afraid they were going to do a really damn good job of it. And then they didn't have an answer for that because they didn't have the superpower or the difference or the other way of thinking of it, that they couldn't possibly do that. And if this person was really good at it, then what will I do? And I think it was fear, or fear of the unknown. I don't know. I've got some
Yes,
opinions on any given day. But that in itself is a problem. If you've got somebody who's in management stopping people from going into management because of their fears, then they're in the wrong place for starters.
absolutely. We have that, and also because at the end of the day, I very much encourage people to essentially become kind of like an activist. Like if you work at a place, at an organization, and things are not working, like for example, when I was working in big tech and I pushed an accommodation, their policy and procedure is fax forms in. And I'm thinking to myself,
Yeah.
wait, fax? Who uses fax machine? And it
Anymore.
turns out all that time there was never a fax machine and nothing got done. So I actually fought to get that fixed. So it's things like that. Like ask for what you need and don't be afraid to say it doesn't work. We need to fix this.
Yes, exactly. And sometimes that binary approach to things is exactly what's needed as well.
Hmm.
So I'll ask you one more question before I
Sure.
finish up with you, although I've probably 100 more of them in my head that I would happily ask.
Absolutely.
And it's for anyone who is neurodivergent and is considering cybersecurity. I know actually for anyone who's considering cybersecurity, it can be an intimidating career because it moves so fast and there's so much information and learning and technology. For anyone who is neurodivergent that's considering going into it, what would you share with them that you know now that would you think might help?
Oof, that's a long,
Mm.
that's a very low question. I think at the high level, people in the media and in the industry, they talk about the cybersecurity skills gap and there are thousands of unfilled jobs, but has changed significantly in the past several years. Nowadays, you see people in our field getting laid off and people just having a hard time finding jobs. So like number one, it's not easy to get a job anymore because back in the day, like you can just have like Security Plus and easily get a job and have people fight over you. Number two, because of that, it's okay to want to do something else. Like
Yeah.
AI and machine learning is huge now, and even if you went to university and got trained in cybersecurity, many of those same skills are transferable to other fields like AI and machine learning, like Python. Python it can very much be used in AI machine learning. And number three, you gotta do what you gotta do. Like example, if the job isn't there where you live, it's okay to move. It's okay to do a different job. It's okay to even not work in cybersecurity at all. Just do what you want to do what you got to do to survive, do what you got to do to thrive, and it goes back to what you were saying before. Got to find your happiness and grab onto it.
Yes, absolutely. And I think if that's at the core of what you're doing, then roll with that. Like, and it's also, I was just thinking while you were saying there that if you have a passion for cybersecurity, but there isn't roles out there in it, then do the job, fund the passion. Because I know for me, like I easily find enough hours in the week to equate to a full time job in all of the stuff I love to do around cybersecurity and women in cyber and ADHD and all these other fun things that I'm involved in. But the job can fund it because, that's how the world works. But look, it has been fantastic to talk to you. I talked to you all day. And I really appreciate you taking the time. And yeah, I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
Absolutely, and thank you for having me on your show, Jennifer. I really appreciate it. I'm
No
honored.
worries.